Hello everybody. So today I'm going to be talking about a book that comes from a collection of children's books that I have that are extremely inappropriate for children. And I think out of all the ones that I've come across, this is the absolute worst book that you could possibly show a child. And in this episode, I'm going to tell you why that is. Before I get started, you should probably all know that this episode does deal with some pretty sensitive topics. So if you came here wanting to just watch me eat a piece of fruit, this is not one of those episodes, okay? I'll put a link in one of the corners here. Click that. It'll take you to me eating fruit. It'll be great. This episode, however, no, we're going to go into some dark territory here. And also because of that, this episode is rated TV-14. So kids, go away. This isn't for you. Wait until you turn 14 and then come back. But right now, this isn't for you. Don't Make Me Go Back, Mommy is a book that was written by Doris Sanford with illustrations by Graci Evans. Now, the two of them worked on a number of projects together for this publishing company, Multnomah Press, which is a Christian publishing company. These are all books dealing with very difficult topics. Adoption, drug use, alcoholism, life-threatening illnesses. These books were made for parents or counselors to sit down with a child and by using the stories and the illustrations to help them get through what is a very difficult thing for a child to deal with. Some of these books are on very, very specific topics, such as this one about a child that has cerebral palsy. And she ends up getting help from John Stamos randomly. These were made in the 80s and 90s, guys. Although you can see how these sorts of books would be helpful for children, the execution of them is not very good. And because of that, there is a lot of very questionable things in these books. If you have some time, I would highly suggest checking out the Doris Hall of Infamy from awfullibrarybooks.net. I'll put a link to that in the description below. Out of all of the books that Doris Sanford and Graci Evans have made, Don't Make Me Go Back, Mommy is by far the most notorious of them. This is a book for children who have been ritualistically abused by Satanists. I'm not kidding. On each page, there are descriptions of all of the horrors that satanic cults supposedly would put a child through. And on each page, there are nightmarish illustrations of anguished children. You know, to help them cope. The story follows two concerned parents that are trying to understand the strange behavior of their 5-year-old, Allison. She, of course, has been brainwashed by satanic teachers at her daycare center. The teachers are a man and a woman who like to glare ominously. Ugh. And on each page, this little girl says some really, really messed up stuff to her parents. Here's just a scattering of some of those gems for you. My teacher is nice, but I don't like the juice at school. They call it magic juice. My teacher said the reason why they locked the door is so that we'll be safe inside. Oh, guess what, Mommy? I got married today. Okay. I already had the magic surgery. They put a monster in me. My other mommy said, I don't have to use the potty anymore. This book is not just nightmare fuel for a child, but this would scare the living hell out of a parent. Like an overprotective parent, this would kill them. A normal parent, this would give them nightmares. This book scares me, and I have a freaking skull on my shelf. There's something wrong about the art style in this book that just makes it, like, disturbing. It's very realistic in how it's done, but it's also slightly askew and cartoonish. The subject matter in this book is extremely mature, but at the same time, it looks like everything was illustrated in crayon. So there's this bizarre melding of something that is both childish and also something that is very mature. And because of that, it just, like, doesn't work. Not only does this art make me feel uncomfortable just for, like, the face value of it, but there is a ton of creepy ass symbolism in those illustrations. So every time you read this book, it just gets scarier and scarier and scarier. For instance, the male teacher in this book is almost always brandishing keys. Well, that's ominous. There's an eerie stuffed rabbit hidden on every page in the first half of this book. Sometimes that rabbit is kind of hidden, so it's hard to find. Kind of like trying to find Waldo in a Where's Waldo book. Only you don't want to find Waldo because Waldo is going to stab you. Finding the rabbit is not a pleasant thing, it's just creepy. Here's some more symbolism for you. That female teacher is pregnant. Yeah, see that? Aw, isn't that cute? No, it's not cute. This is suggesting that that teacher is going to have this baby so she can sacrifice it.
Human sacrifice is sometimes an element in rituals performed by people calling themselves Satanists. The ideal sacrifice, we are told, apparently requires babies.
Why did you do this, Graci Evans? Is this supposed to be helpful? Because it really seems like you are trying to put subliminal messages into the children that read your book. Subliminal messages that are meant to scare them and give them nightmares. Now, there is a reason why this book came out, and to explain that, we're going to have to delve deep into a stain on US history.
Devil worship. Exposing Satan's underground.
Whether a Satan exists is a matter of belief, but we are certain that Satanism exists. To some, it's a religion. To others, it's the practice of evil in the devil's name. It exists, and it's flourishing.
The Satanic Panic is an instance of mass hysteria that took place in the US during the 80s and early 90s. During this time, parents were terrified that Satanists were hiding throughout the country, ready to whisk their children away. A lot of things led up to this moment, from a fear that rock and roll had secret devil-worshipping messages hidden in it, and movies that dealt with the occult. But things really reached a rolling boil in 1980 when psychologist Lawrence Pastor and his patient Michelle Smith released the best-selling memoir, Michelle Remembers.
Children are involved in graveyards and crematoria, in funeral parlors, because one of the primary focuses of these people is death. Everything is attempted to be destroyed and killed in that child, and in society, everything of goodness.
Pastor was treating Smith for depression by using the controversial method of hypnosis. The first time that he put her under, she started screaming and talking with the voice of a child. Pastor thought that this meant that Michelle had memories that she had suppressed, so he used hypnosis to try to uncover the entire story. After over 600 hours of sessions, Pazder was left with a bizarre tale of Smith being tortured by the Church of Satan for 81 straight days in a cemetery. Amazing how nobody noticed that.
These people cover their tracks very well. When they dispose of a body, they use that body as well. They will use, as I said, they will cremate that body. They will use the ashes that will become part of what they will continue to present to that particular group.
The story told in Michelle Remembers has been thoroughly debunked, and there is no evidence whatsoever that any of it actually happened. It just goes to show what somebody's mind can invent while in a dreamlike state like hypnosis. The claims in this book were so outlandish that Anton LaVey, the actual founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey sued Pazder for libel and won.
That's a popular misconception too, is that children are sacrificed at the altar, or that animals are used for sacrifices. And it's a horrible, horrible misconception.
The Church of Satan is real. It's real even today, and there are a bunch of people out there who are Satanists, but they're not killing babies and abducting children. They're just dressing in black and having a lot of sex.
These middle-class housewives that are worried that we want to abduct their children are barking up the wrong tree, because we wouldn't want anything to do with their whole mediocre and corrupt lifestyle.
If there's anyone out there who is abducting children and putting them in dungeons, is that guy who's honking his horn right now after 10 p.m. Oh, come on, dude. Despite there not being any evidence supporting the story, the book was a bestseller, and a lot of people started believing that satanic cults were hiding in towns across America. The worst thing about it, though, is that Michelle Remembers became required reading for a lot of people who are actually in authoritative positions. If you don't believe me, take a look at this clip.
Today it's my privilege to host this program on a little-known area in law enforcement, but important to every small community and every large city across our vast country. It's the area of satanic cults and how they impact our families.
The problem involved with the cult explosion is becoming a many-faceted puzzle confronting law enforcement today. Not only is it difficult for us to understand the secret practices of satanic worship, but there are deeper reasons that go beyond mere lust for power and the unlimited drugs and deviant sexual behavior that go with it.
I know it all seems very ridiculous, but people were scared. This sort of misinformation actually affected people's lives. Innocent people had their lives ruined because of this sort of stuff.
The Sheriff's Department began investigating charges of satanic worship and human sacrifice.
Here they are, digging up this land with a backhoe, doing infrared looking for bodies. And they didn't find anything. It's wasn't anything there.
They suspected the Cummings were involved in satanic rituals.
They knocked on the door, grabbed the kids. Didn't arrest us, just grabbed the kids in the middle of the night and left with them.
There's nothing worse than you've got a kid clawing you. I had claw marks on my back because he didn't want to let go of me.
In Bakersfield, California, in the early 1980s, 36 people were convicted for abusing children. Social workers that were involved in these allegations had read Michelle Remembers as part of their training, and during interviews, children were asked leading questions suggesting satanic rituals. The children didn't fully understand the situation that they were in, so they've responded to these questions with imaginative stories, validating what the interviewers wanted them to say. And then they were taken away from their parents, and their parents were put in jail. There were 36 convictions in this case, and out of those 36 convictions, 34 of them were reversed. Some of those parents spent years in prison. This man, John Stoll, spent 19 years in prison for something that he very likely did not do.
While the convicted were learning to adapt to their new lives in prison, the kids who had testified against them slowly began to admit what really happened behind closed doors with investigators.
I remember telling them no for about 4 hours, and I was just tired. I just wanted to go home, so I said what they wanted me to say. They promised me that nobody would get in trouble or go to prison.
Let's go now to the McMartin Preschool parents who have gathered for us in Los Angeles.
When the children started talking, they started talking about robes and candles. They described an Episcopal church. And once they started narrowing that down, you could see that it had to be satanic. It's very important in satanic religions to have a priest because they truly do believe in power. The truth about Satanism is they truly do use blood, and they mix it with urine, and then they also use the real meat, the real flesh. This is what makes Satanism true.
The real reason why this book came out, I'm pretty sure, has a lot to do with the Mcmartin Trial. This was centered around a number of satanic abuse accusations directed towards the Mcmartin family, owners of the Mcmartin Preschool in Manhattan Beach, California. Ray Buckey, a teacher and the grandson of the company's founder, was especially under fire.
My name is Judy Johnson and I want to report a crime.
A mother accused him of abusing her son, as well as committing other horrible acts such as bestiality and levitation. This concerned parent, unsurprisingly, was found to have paranoid schizophrenia. However, because of her charges against this daycare, letters were sent out to the homes of all of the children that attended the school, asking parents to question their children about it. This obviously terrified parents, so many of them were concerned that their children were also victims. The Children's Institute International, which is a children's rights group, one that is still around today, by the way, they conducted interviews with the children, and again, they used leading questions.
Using puppets to encourage the children to reveal what happened, the therapists were able to unlock the horrible secrets of the McMartin School.
I think our therapists, in many respects, started out being very careful about that back then, but as they became more persuaded that something had happened, there probably were some leading questions.
It was obvious in the interviews that all kinds of techniques were highly suggestible, highly pressuring, and is capable of creating false memories of abuse in children, often permanent memories.
By the way, our friends Lawrence Pazder and Michelle Smith were also in attendance during these trials in order to help terrified families. Out of 400 children that were interviewed, 360 of them claimed to have been ritualistically abused. 360 out of 400 children. That is a suspiciously high number, isn't it? During these interviews, these children said incredibly fantastic things. One of the more well-known things from the trial is that children said that there was a network of underground tunnels underneath the daycare where all the abuse happened. And in order to get to those tunnels, children were flushed down the toilet. And people believe this.
I took Elizabeth to the school, and she walked right into a bathroom where there was just a little sink and a little toilet. And she said, "This is where the tunnel was." There was no tunnel there. I didn't see a break in the wall. I didn't see anything.
I remember being in what felt like a tunnel and having pictures of what to me I thought was the devil. And there being like candles off the side, like a light, off the wall, and it was dark. And I remember going downstairs to get into it.
They actually excavated the grounds of the school to see if there were tunnels there, and unsurprisingly, they didn't find any tunnels. After 6 years of criminal trials, there were no convictions. However, Ray Buckey had spent 5 years in jail during this trial. The Mcmartin Trial at that point in time was the longest and most expensive trial in American history. There are many, many other cases that occurred during the Satanic Panic, but one thing that almost all of them have in common is improper interrogation techniques. The lesson learned here is that when conducting an interview, especially with highly suggestible individuals like children, you have to be extremely careful. You don't ask questions that can lead them into giving you the answer that you want. This type of interrogation can lead to unreliable testimonies and even implant false memories in the person that you are questioning. This book does exactly that by using terrifying imagery and horrifying descriptions. It can scare a child into thinking that these things actually happen to them. This is bad interrogation practices in book form. The last 2 pages of this book give 10 helpful hints for dealing with your satanic, ritually abused child. Some of these are okay bits of advice for any child going through a difficult time, but then there's also ones like number 4. Be sensitive in talking about God, and do not force the child to participate in taking communion, which the child may associate with blood. Keep in mind that the abusers have sometimes worn clerical robes during the abuse. Or number 8. Some especially frightening experience for the child are Halloween, the child's 6th birthday, nighttime, bathrooms, certain foods that remind the child of particular rituals. One tip that I find very helpful is number 7. Don't interrogate the child about what happened. The child will talk about it in her own way when she is able. Be patient. It's just a shame that this book, in its very existence, does not follow that rule. I would like to make a suggestion for a number 11 for this book. The worst thing about this book is that actual abuse, non-satanic abuse, it happens. To present a child that is going through actual real problems with this insane nonsense, instead of helping that child, you're just going to scare them. This is the last thing that you would want to show a child that is actually going through real problems. Doris Sanford, Graci Evans, the 2 of you have made some questionable books in the past, but with this one, you have really outdone yourselves. And for that, I award this book the Worst Children's Book in the World award. If you can think of a worst one, guys, please let me know. I want it. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed learning about this truly, truly terrible book. I know that this episode does have some kind of like dark and sensitive themes in it, and I apologize for that. But the Satanic Panic, ridiculous as it was, it did happen, and it is a mistake that I think that we can all learn from. So I think that's about it. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Maybe you think your community is immune to these satanic crimes. Well, it's not. The next victim might show up tomorrow on the beat. It could be in your community, or it could be in a major city or a small rural area. Could be a member of your family. Could be someone you know. I challenge you to investigate each crime just a little bit deeper. Let's stop this heinous crime that's going on in the name of the devil. Let's stop it before it takes another victim.